Hey, how are you today? This is Josh Patrick, and you're at the 50/50 Podcast Accelerator. And my guest today is Steve Selengut. Steve is the owner, founder, chief bottle washer for the Retirement Income Coach. And we've been having some really interesting conversations about things he's done with his business. And you're in for a treat today. So instead of me going and yammering on, let's start the conversation. Hey, Steve, how are you today?
I'm great, Josh. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks so much for joining us. Hey, let's start with my favorite question. What's the problem that your business solves for your customers?
Hmm. The I can back into it almost, but here's what I'm going to say. Most people in the 60s, late 50s, and so forth, um, and getting into retirement find that their investment portfolios don't nearly replace the income that their salaries used to bring them. That they've been focusing incorrectly for a number of years, thinking that just the market value was enough to take care of them in retirement. And then they realize, geez, I have to sell things to pay my bills because I'm not making enough income from this stuff, to get me through the month. And that's the biggest realization. And my book and my service coaches people on how to avoid that problem by transitioning from a market value based investment program to one that's income focused all the way.
Okay, can I just interrupt because I love you just gave a very typical answer I get from everybody I ask this question to.
Okay. Sorry.
No, it's fine. It's just it's a great teaching moment for me. So the problem you solve is lack of income for retirees.
Right.
And what you just did was you described what you do for them, but not the problem you solve. And this is something I see almost every business owner I ever encounter. It's like one out of or 5 out of 100 can answer that question correctly the first time around.
Okay.
So you're not alone there, but the truth is you have a very cool thing you do. You help people with income. Now,
Yeah,
when you were doing advisory, you got clients through trade shows.
I did.
And one of the things that I find fascinating is the amount of money I see people spend at trade shows and they get no results whatsoever. That's the majority. You're the outlier there. So what did you do or what do
Oh,
did you do that got you customers by using trade shows?
well, what I did was seriously different, I guess. Most people have a little product or something on their table, and then they had this. I even forget what we used to call that round thing that you used to be able to paste pictures and stuff on. I used to put a. I used to put on that board. I used to. I put some numbers up there, and I put a chart of income progression, my income progression over the years versus and the Dow average or the S&P or one or more of them, and that was it. And then I had a handout that actually was a picture of a photo, of my investment portfolio, quarterly or monthly statement that showed the income being produced within it, and I had that there for people to look at. And I just said to them that, you know, I can, like, I'll bet you that you do not make the percentage of income in your portfolio with your investments as I do for my clients and for myself with my portfolio of investments. And I say, and you'd answer the question, yeah, I'm in the stock market just like you. Yeah, I have bonds just like you. And so it's how I select them and what my requirements are, and the fact that I trade them that makes a difference. And so I get them roped into. Everybody likes to talk about money, Josh. I
So
mean, I
you're at the,
find
but
the same thing.
yeah,
Even
so
traveling the world at dinners,
yeah,
everybody says something about, "What do you think about the market?" So I'll start answering. It's people love to talk about money.
yeah, no question about that. Um, but so you've got these people, you identify them. After the trade show, what happens for you to make them into clients? I'm assuming you're not signing people up at a trade show.
Oh no, you can't possibly do that, but you can get names and numbers and say, "I'm going to call you."
So did you call them?
Oh yeah, I
See,
did.
that's the difference right there. Most businesses that do go to trade shows, they collect a gazillion cards. Maybe they stick them into a database. Maybe they put a big rubber band around them at the end of the thing, and they never get around to calling because it gets in the way. Business gets in the way.
Business gets in the way. Yeah.
So if you don't have a system for calling, that means you're probably wasting all your time at a trade show.
I agree. You had to. Now I don't know that I didn't have a technology, so to speak. We were still uh, using regular telephones, regular telephones, hard lines and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But I didn't have any trouble. I mean, I had a couple employees. I gave them the people and told them as much as I remembered about it, along with the name and the number. And I had them call. If we had addresses, we wrote them. So I
Cool.
had I had a staff that did it, and we got in touch with them. And I even said, remind them who I was and what I showed them, what I talked to them about. And
Yeah, that's really important to do also because you go to a trade show, you have 9,000 conversations, they all kind of blend in together.
yeah, you got to take notes and you got to write it down. So we
Yeah,
we
there's
had
no,
it was usually two of us at the trade show,
yeah.
and most of the time it was actually the stockbroker that I worked through that was with me. So we both could handle any kind of conversation with these people.
So the other question I have, which I was just thinking about, is not only did you go to a trade show, but I assume you had a system for selecting which type of trade shows you would go to.
We did. We wanted to meet particular types of people, business owners, the other guys that were at the trade show were most likely to be our best prospects. They had money. If they were there and they had the money to spend on a trade show, we assumed that they had investment portfolios. That's what we were looking for, and
Did
we
you?
uh, and we had designed things on the top of our board that attracted people who had investments. We sometimes even had giveaways of some sort, stuff like that.
So what type of trade show would you go to?
Geez, it's hard for me to remember all the names, but we went to places. We went to places in New York City. We went to places in Atlantic City. So we went to some big hotel type operations and convention centers even. We went to
So,
some
but
big
but what
places.
was the trade?
We had this little stand, and
Yeah.
some of the things were as big as this room, and we had this little stand. And I'll tell you, we always had people at our talking to us.
So again, I'm going to try this again. Um, was it like industry trade shows or was it?
Industry. It wasn't necessarily the financial services industry. It was medicals. We went to
Okay.
medical professionals,
Yep.
stuff like people that you expect were in the upper echelon of wealth, of had money, had good types of businesses that generated wealth, and that they needed they and that they didn't have the time to take care of it by themselves.
So it would seem to me that since you're at a medical convention, it could be orthopods, it could be cardiologists, whatever it is, And I'm going to
anesthesiologists
bet
want to
you're one of the
remember.
few. I'm going to bet one of you. You're one of the few financial service people displaying at it. So you're different there. And number two, the people that stop and talk to you at your booth are self-selecting in because they're already showing interest in what you have.
Right, exactly. They see those
Versus
numbers.
if you're at an orthopedic convention and it's a hip replacement, they might stop because they want information about hip replacements, but not the hip, the hip replacement piece itself.
Yeah.
So you have a different sort of thing, and because you're different at the trade show, you're getting people to self-select in. So when you follow up with them, I'm going to bet you had a very high follow-up rate.
Yeah, it was really good. I mean, we grew a lot from the trade show experience. The other thing about the way we ran our business for investors, it wasn't a we think or we do type. We weren't with a big brokerage firm that we were just pawns for them selling. We were an independent manager. You were looking at the guy who's going to be making your investment decisions. I was fortunate enough to be able to say this to people, and we even had it like a promise type piece. And we said that we, my broker and I, will never ever put you in a security that we don't own ourselves in our own portfolios. And that was our promise to them, that they knew that if we were investing something for them, we owned it ourselves.
Oh, that's
And that
cool.
was a big selling. It's still a big selling point. In my community, I have these universes of the closed end funds that I use, and I prepare them myself. And I tell them, I own everything on this sheet of paper, and I'm giving it to you as a source of things to research on your own. But you can know that I own them too. And
That's cool.
it's
Did you help them learn how to research also?
yeah, I do Q&As with them, and where to go to. CEF Connect is the site that I use. I said, this is where you go to this tab and do this, go to this tab and do that. Don't look at those two tabs, they don't mean a thing to us. you know so yeah, we have a whole educational program for people using interactive Q&As with members, to teach them everything they need to know.
So while we were chatting before we went live, you mentioned that podcasts are your new trade shows.
Yeah, and you actually drew that parallel. I would have never thought of that, but when you said it, I said, that's really what this is. It's almost the same type of thing. I'm getting You're giving me the opportunity to speak to people and to just explain, like what I just said. They're not going to find any other advisor that's going to tell them that. You know what I mean?
So, so,
So yes,
so
it's a
why
whole
are
lot.
why are podcasts good for business owners to be guests on?
Oh my God! It just gives you exposure, literally all over the world, and and instantly you almost get a brand from the podcast. You almost get other podcasters calling you because they saw you on somebody else's podcast. That's happened.
Interesting.
And you can find dozens of podcasts, like specialty apps you can use, not apps, but podcast businesses that match podcasters with people like me, you
Yeah,
know,
those are podcast agencies.
or podcast agencies like you and I got together through an agent.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
most of the time with me, podcast agencies are a real pain in the neck because
are they?
they don't know what the podcast is about and they keep pitching you on people that don't fit. That's besides the point.
I have experienced that, but I don't pay this guy unless I actually get on a podcast.
Yeah. Well, the interesting thing that, and I think this is an important piece for if you're about to become a podcast guest. If you're a business owner and you're thinking, gee, podcast might make sense for me, I want to get on a few podcasts. We invite people who own businesses all the time to come on, and most of them never respond. And I think that's a big mistake. Now, what we do, and you and I did this, we had a short conversation to see if this podcast would be good for you and good for us. And having that pre interview really helps you know whether this podcast is going to be right for you and it's going to help you get to where you want to go. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. Because with you and I, initially we weren't really sure,
Right.
but our conversation has made you know, we put that fit together, like you just said. The podcast and the trade show of the past are you know, just a new technology for that very same type of activity. You know, where you get to meet people, even though I'm not meeting all those people now. Anyone that turns this on, they're going to get something out of this particular conversation that we're having. I mean,
I think there's some I think
I've
there's some
gotten
high
some
value
ideas
here.
already. You know, you hope so. You know, I hope so. You know,
Yeah. Well, I've been doing this for a while and I can tell when there's good ideas and not good
you
ideas.
know,
And
yeah,
this is kind of I have to
and
say I've done 400 and I don't know, 38 episodes.
wow,
And I don't think I've ever had an episode where we talked about how to use trade shows and how to use podcasts. This is an unusual thing for me.
it's my first.
And the truth is, when we bring business owners like you on, what we want to see is where are the successes they've had in their business and what's worked really well. And for you, it was trade shows, and now it's podcasts.
Podcasts are
We were
working well.
talking about Amazon ads for your book. I mean, you saw how many copies of your book have you sold?
Over 7,000,
Okay,
and that's a
7,000 copies of a book. That puts you in the top 1/10 of 1% of all authors.
I think so. Yeah, and
The
particularly
only other business writer,
in
the only other business writer I know who self-publishes in your range is a guy named Tom Deans who lives in Toronto, and he sold a couple of million books
wow.
because he uses well, he has a really interesting strategy. Is that he's a public speaker, and instead of getting a fee, he has a sponsor buy one book for everybody in the audience.
That's a great idea.
And it is absolutely brilliant. I think he charges $28 or $27 per book. And it costs him like $1.35 to publish it. And he speaks to 500 to 1,000 people at a time.
I
So you
wish
just
I
put those
still,
numbers together. Those are big numbers.
yeah, I wish I still had the energy to speak. To do, you know, there are places today. I think there are places you can go on the internet and find connections to do anything. There are people who are organizing retreats that I could speak at. There are
Yes.
people like you. There, you can go on these things that says for speakers, and I could go on them if I want, but I don't have the energy for that anymore.
It's a lot of work. You know, when I was doing a lot of speaking, what we did, and it was really the only thing that worked well, unless you're, a major name like a sports person or a politician or somebody like
Yeah,
that,
yeah.
was I would ask everybody I ran across who owned a business. I say, "Are you in a trade show? I mean, a trade group? Are you a member of a trade association?" And if they said yes, I would ask them if they were in leadership. If they said yes to that, then I would say, "Would you introduce me to your person to hire speakers?" And I would often get speaking gigs that way.
Mhm.
And what I found, and I think this is a really important thing, my friend Tom Deans, who speaks to 500 or 1,000 people, he's not looking for clients. He just wants to speak. In fact, he won't accept clients.
Hmm.
But if you want clients, you don't want to speak to 500 people. You want to speak to 50 people. And you want to speak to them for 2.5 to 3 hours doing a workshop.
Yeah. Okay.
And the
But
reason you want to do this is you're able to create legitimacy and create a connection with the people in your audience.
mhm, right.
And if you
I
do
used
that, you'll get business.
Yeah, I do. There's an out. It's not an outfit. It's an organization called the American Association of Individual Investors,
Yes.
and they have probably about 60, maybe 50 or 60 chapters throughout the country.
Yep.
And I used to go speak to them, and I'd have my board. I don't know if I used to ship it out or what. No, no, what I did, I developed a show that I could put on a screen, and I got up on the stage and I showed my all my things, and I talked about. I didn't even have a book back then. Wish I Now I'm trying to see if I can get to visit him to pitch my book, and I would do it exactly like you said, no charge, just everybody buys a book. But I haven't been able to make that connection
Well, going
yet.
back to selling, although I won't use the language I was thinking of, a ton of books with a word before it.
Yeah.
Starts with
Okay.
S. Uh, you're using Amazon ads to mostly sell your books. Am I correct?
A good part of them, I've been using Amazon ads right from the start. I'm in the second vendor now. He also is a podcaster. That's how I got to him. I got on his podcast. He invited me. He said he wanted to market it, and I made a deal with him, and I've been using him for months. And my job is, I tell him his job is to beat this month from last year. He's only missed one, and he that was last month, April. He missed, but in May, he's the total May and April is way up, way above last year, and that's all I'm asking him to do. And he's been phenomenal.
That's great. Well, I'll tell you something. I'm very impressed with what you do. It's rare I find. Well, I've talked to a ton of authors over the year, and it's really rare that I see an author that actually has sold any books.
I noticed that. I look at statistics a lot, and I see that some books hardly sell anything. This is a and I don't really want to talk about the book, but it could be advice to other authors of an approach that we used in this book that's very, very different and that has really worked. And it's the approach where uh, my wife and I sit down at a table next to another couple. We're on a Viking cruise. We're in Amsterdam. It's the first night. We're getting to know the other people who are going to be there, and it's 2 nights before this. And this is another couple that came early, and we sit there and we start talking. And the book is this conversation between the four of us,
Oh, cool.
and that's how the book develops.
It's basically a parable.
Okay, yeah,
Yeah, a
it's
business novel is often called a business parable.
okay.
And that's what my books are also.
I really cool. I always
Yeah,
thought
and I
parables.
find them much more approachable. Business owners don't want to read how-tos; they like stories.
Yeah, so that's what this is. This one big story,
Yeah, that's
and
great.
and it
That's
has
wonderful.
other
Yeah,
stories inside. It's even got a Q&A with a Facebook group about
yeah,
this
that's
process.
cool.
So
So,
it
Steve, unfortunately, we're out of time. And I'm going to bet some people are going to want to find you and find your book and get copies of your book and read it and probably enjoy it. So, how would they go about doing that?
the book is at Amazon. It's
Yep,
retirement money secrets.
yep,
Okay, it's in all four varieties, from Audible to hard copy, ebooks, everything. And it's also in all the other stores too. You can go to Barnes and Noble and order it, whatever. Um, and I have a website called theincomecoach.net,
yep,
and that explains the coaching I do and a lot about me, and it also has some sample of podcasts I've been on, and typical stuff. And then the final thing, after they read the book and stuff, I have that educational community that I talked
yes.
about, where it's really the investment course you didn't get in college, you
Okay,
know,
cool.
and it's
So,
uh,
Steve,
it's mentioned.
thanks so much. I really appreciate it. And I've got two things I'd like you to do. First, go to wherever you're listening to this podcast and give us an honest and rated review. If you love it, it's 5 stars. If you hate it, it's 1 star. If you do me 1 star, I'll cry just a little bit. But if you
I
love
would.
it, you can give me 5. And the second thing is, which is even more important, is I'm looking for business owners who want to talk about their story on this podcast. And if you're interested, just go drop me a line at jpatrick at stage 2 solution. That's solution, not solutions.com. And it's the number 2. That's jpatrick at stage2solution.com. And let me know that you're interested in coming on the show. And we'll send you a link. We'll have a conversation to see if it's a good fit for you. So this is Josh Patrick with Steve Selengut. You're at the 50/50 Accelerator Podcast. Thanks a lot for stopping by. I hope to see you back here really soon.